Commander Buzz Kaplan of the diplomatic vessel Definitively Not a Warship was enduring what he would generously describe as a subpar first contact experience. In his defense, no one had forewarned him that the universal greeting of a smile would be interpreted by the Galactic Assembly as a primitive war cry, showcasing one's bone-crushing teeth. "Please stay composed," he said to the room full of frantic alien diplomats, which only escalated the situation, as apparently, showing teeth while speaking was a signal of imminent aggression in 17 different star systems. The ship's name wasn't helping either. Some brilliant mind in Earth's diplomatic office had decided they'd be clever with that one. Real subtle, guys, Kaplan thought, mentally noting to track down the responsible party and introduce them to Earth's long-standing custom of leaving a strongly worded note in the break room. "The humans are displaying their feeding apparatus while emitting sonic waves," shrieked Representative Mexel, a being that appeared as though it would result from an AI attempting to draw a blend between a seahorse and a disco ball. "They're assessing our nutritional value." Kaplan promptly closed his mouth and did his best to appear as non-threatening as possible, which was surprisingly challenging when you're a 6-foot-tall bipedal creature in a room full of aliens who had apparently evolved from various species of anxious space plankton. "Ambassador XS, Kaplan addressed the least terrified alien, a tall, graceful being with crystalline features who had at least stopped trying to hide behind their ceremonial staff. "We come in peace." He raised his hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture, instantly realizing his mistake when he remembered that this species had evolved from prey animals that were historically captured by flying predators. The high-pitched sound emitted by Zix could have shattered glass if the windows weren't made of transparent aluminum. The human is displaying its grasping appendage. "Battle stations." "No, wait," Kaplan hurriedly tried to explain, lowering his hand and unintentionally triggering another panic response. Apparently, rapid downward movement was a sign of aggression for yet another alien species. Kaplan was now seriously contemplating just standing motionless and communicating via interpretive blinking. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Some species began extending their defensive spines, others exuded alarm pheromones, and one particularly dramatic delegate fainted, their gelatinous form spreading across the floor in what Kaplan had to admit was a very impressive display of evolutionary self-preservation. "The human remains motionless, analyzing our defensive capabilities," announced the Council's Chief of Security, a being resembling an origami butterfly crafted from titanium. "Such tactical patience. Truly, they are the most cunning of predators." Kaplan resisted the urge to facepalm, knowing that any sudden movement towards his own head would likely be interpreted as some sort of ritual combat preparation. The fact that humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel was beginning to feel like a cosmic clerical mistake. "Perhaps," he suggested carefully, keeping his voice low and trying not to move his lips too much, "we should take a brief recess to collect ourselves." This, somehow, made things worse as the word recess sounded too similar to an ancient war cry in one of the Council species' languages. The chamber's emergency containment fields snapped into place, and Kaplan found himself surrounded by a shimmering energy barrier while warning sirens blared in 6-part harmony. "The human has invoked the ancient combat ritual," declared one of the Council members, their eye stalks vibrating with alarm. "They seek to establish dominance through traditional warfare." Kaplan stared at the ceiling of the chamber, contemplating the life choices that had brought him to this point. He had wanted to be a pastry chef, but no, he had followed the family tradition of space exploration. He could have been making eclairs right now, but instead, he was unintentionally scaring a room full of aliens with his basic facial expressions. "Would it help if I just stood in the corner and thought quiet thoughts?" he offered, immediately regretting his suggestion as 3 different species began emergency evacuation procedures. Apparently, corners were sacred spaces in their cultures. As the chaos unfolded around him, Kaplan became increasingly certain this would be a very long day. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, he was convinced whoever named his ship was still laughing. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was going about as well as a chocolate teapot in a supernova. Kaplan sat in what he was told was the designated diplomatic observation pod, though it looked more like a maximum security containment unit with better lighting. Ambassador Zix took the floor, their crystalline form refracting light into what the Council species considered a soothing pattern. "Esteemed colleagues," they began, their translator rendering their speech into Standard Galactic, with only minor feedback squawks. "We must address the human situation with all due precision." Kaplan noticed they'd positioned 7 different types of energy shields between his pod and the Council floor. He was beginning to feel like the galaxy's most disappointing zoo exhibit. "Our initial analysis suggests that humans are far more terrifying than we originally feared," Zix continued, bringing up a holographic screen filled with heavily redacted Earth tourism brochures. "They deliberately construct artificial mountains and then hurl themselves down them at high speeds for entertainment." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. One delegate's chromatophores began displaying emergency broadcast test patterns. "Surely you mean for military training?" asked Representative Mexel, their disco ball surface dimming with concern. "No," Zix replied gravely. "They call it skiing." Several counselors began stress molting. Kaplan considered explaining the concept of fun but opted not to, fearing it might lead to yet another interstellar incident. "Furthermore," Zix continued, their crystal segments clinking nervously, "they regularly gather in large numbers to observe ritualized combat between specialized warriors who attempt to move an inflated leather sphere across designated territory lines. These must be their war games," theorized the security chief, their titanium wings folding and unfolding anxiously. "Clearly preparation for planetary invasion scenarios." "Actually," Kaplan interjected through the pod's communication system, "that's just football, or soccer, depending on where you're from." The council erupted into another panic. "They have multiple names for their combat rituals. Their warfare protocols are so complex they require separate classification systems." Kaplan slumped in his observation pod. "That's not what never mind," he muttered, beginning to understand why Earth's previous diplomatic efforts had ended with strongly worded letters of apology and several requests for psychological counseling. The Council's archival specialist, a being that resembled a sentient library catalog with tentacles, pulled up more data. "Most disturbing is their method of selecting planetary leaders," Zix continued. "They engage in something called politics." "Explain this politics," demanded one of the counselors, their fear glands visibly swelling. "They gather in large groups," the archivist explained, their tentacles trembling. "Engage in verbal combat, make promises they don't intend to keep, and then participate in a process called voting, which appears to be a way of determining which warrior has superior propaganda techniques." Kaplan had to admit, they weren't entirely wrong about that one. "And their information distribution networks," Zix continued, pulling up screenshots of various social media platforms, "are filled with something called memes, which we believe to be encrypted military communications hidden within images of small Earth predators and oddly positioned text." "Those are just cat pictures," Kaplan tried to explain. "They're funny," he added, but that only made the council even more terrified. "The human claims their military codes are humorous," shrieked one of the counselors. "Such psychological warfare sophistication." A junior analyst rushed in, waving what appeared to be a tablet made of living tissue. "Emergency update. We've discovered humans have developed weapons of mass destruction, they call puns." The council chamber descended into chaos once again. 3 different species simultaneously initiated their species equivalent of filing emergency paperwork. "Perhaps," suggested Zix, trying to restore order, "we should consider implementing a galaxy-wide quarantine around Earth's solar system for safety." "Oh, come on!" Kaplan protested. Isn't that a bit of an overreaction? The human uses psychological manipulation techniques to question our judgment, announced the security chief. Clearly, they are masters of cognitive warfare. Kaplan watched as the council began drafting what was undoubtedly the most paranoid containment protocol in galactic history. He seriously considered explaining human interpretive dance just to see what would happen, but decided against it, sensing that any sudden movement could trigger yet another diplomatic catastrophe. As the council descended into another round of panic-induced bureaucracy, Kaplan pulled out his personal tablet and began drafting his mission report. Day 2 of First Contact accidentally convinced the galactic community that humans are hyper-intelligent Deathworlders with complex military codes hidden in cat pictures. Request immediate transfer to literally anywhere else. Also, we're going to need more coffee. Little did Kaplan know that last line would trigger the next major diplomatic crisis. But, in hindsight, he probably should have seen it coming.